So we figured out a solution for now. So I think we're back. Sorry for the technical difficulties there, but hopefully we've solved it and we're back on with the show. So uh, I think we got your message, Dustin. I think if you had any other things that you wanted to mention, um, I kind of said a couple things after you guys left too. So,
Yeah, I don't think I heard any of it.
but basically I was saying don't forget Aaron Rodgers. He's really good.
Right,
Um,
right, yeah.
you know, you obviously need to give up players to get good players, but I think overall your team has improved a lot and definitely improves your position. That quote I had at the Discord about the Dak hurting your team, I was going to save it for the show, but then I sometimes just let it loose and and put it in the chat, but yeah, it definitely hurt, and I think this really increases your chances of winning. I guess a question for you, Diaz, I think you've already kind of answered it, saying that his team is now in a tier in the top tier of the league. But what would you say your chances for this team are for making the playoffs?
Dustin's team?
Yep, Dustin's team.
Oh, I consider them already in the playoffs.
Nah, I think that's pretty premature. So that's actually part of the thinking that we had. Like, I think it is premature to consider this team a playoff team for a lot because I think so many of the 4-4 teams below, you know, the top three teams right now are looking very dangerous right now. And just the fact that there's so many of them means that one
So
a
many.
couple of, yeah, a couple
Yeah,
of them are going to rise up for sure, and
for
then
sure.
it's going to be a fight. But I mean, part of the
Yeah,
thinking was like even if this does end up not being a playoff team, I do think for the consolation bracket purposes, like it'll be overall hopefully a good move in that sense too. So we did think about it like, oh, what if this team doesn't have the horses to make a playoff run? And I yeah you know I we're 5-3, so I do consider us a little bit more likely than maybe some of the teams sitting at 4-4, but I don't think it's a guarantee at all.
yeah. This was going to be one of the things for as a narrative that I was going to have for the show, but you went ahead and made this trade, and so now I can't really talk about it, but I was going to say this team, great kills. I know they're 5-3 right now, but maybe they don't even make the playoffs. Obviously, that's changed. I don't think I can say that now with this trade. I think they are going to make the playoffs. I wouldn't say it's a lock, but it's definitely increased the chances for sure. And maybe I put it at like 70% right now. But
Yeah.
prior to the trade, I was
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
down on great kills.
Another thing that helps is I think both Rogers and Russell Wilson are
Post post by. Yep.
past their bye. Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
So I mean, yeah, we're in week 9 right now, so there's 4 regular season weeks left, and I think that gives us a slightly better chance, to make the playoffs at least. So
For
that was
sure.
also a consideration.
For sure. Let's talk about Mars because a lot of times we focus on the team that got better for this season, but then there's also the trade partner on the other side who's thinking about next season as well. In terms of their return, how did you think they did, Diaz?
So, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a great player. He was the first pick in the rookie draft, so
Mm-hmm.
he would be $33 to keep next year, and then I think 53 the year after. So, running backs are not players that you're traditionally going to want to lock up long term because of how short their shelf life is. But it's going to be interesting to see how people treat the different positional keepers under the new rules. You look at a player like Clyde Edwards-Helaire and you say, well, he's already had his cheapest season. Uh, he didn't quite perform. He didn't hit his ceiling that we had hoped that maybe we had hoped for as a top 5 back, which is the guy who is the lead back in Kansas City's offense could be. And so you question, could this be a situation where he never really quite gets there? Wonky, I'd be curious about your perspective as the Josh Jacobs owner, who I feel, maybe is in a similar situation or maybe an even better situation because, well, Edwards-Helaire lost some snaps last week, but it was a blowout. So maybe you
Yeah,
don't really expect that to happen moving forward. But I'm just curious, when you play in a true dynasty league, the receivers are the most valuable dynasty players because you can have them on your team forever and their peak lasts for 5 years or more.
Right, right.
So I'm curious to see, unless Clyde Edwards-Helaire does become that top 5 running back, you basically keep him next year and the year after, and then after that it becomes prohibitive to hold on to him. I'm wondering if John could have turned 2 quarterbacks into 2 cheaper keepers,
Hmm.
but knowing John, I'm sure he explored all those options and just didn't like what was out there.
Sure, sure. And I think this move must also have implications for him this season as well. I think he probably is thinking about, not being the last two teams. So I think that's where potentially Ben and Amari are playing into the trade. But in terms of your question, Diaz, I think Clyde, it's an interesting case. And, I think for me, the situation for my year has been just really unfortunate. And so I can't really say in terms of how much Josh Jacobs had an implication on that. I think he was great. I think he is great. I think it was, a great contract for me for this year, and I think maybe even for next year as well. I think what you're saying in terms of the shelf life, very valid, but in terms of the height of it, because the counter argument is about how the running backs have that just that positional advantage, right? Their value because they are running backs, and that's what everyone wants, those top running backs to compete for the year. And so John must be thinking about just 2021. I want to be one of the contenders with Clyde Edwards-Helaire as one of my top backs. Dustin, anything you want to add on?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you're thinking of like, oh, like I want this trade to set me up for like, 4 or 5 years. No, I don't think a running back is the answer ever, really, just
Right, right.
because the nature of the position. But if you look at, project a little bit ahead and see what guys are going to be kept. If you want a top 3, top 4 running back, you either have to have a keeper of, that sort, and maybe not even top 4, top 5, but like even a top 10 running back. If you want one of those guys, you either have to have him kept or spend, 93 on Mixon, 104 on Zeke, 120 on, CMC. And I think John saw kind of, the downside of committing $121 to one player and how it kind of makes your team inflexible, and like there's only so many teams that could trade for that. So I think like yeah, maybe CEH isn't going to set you up for 3-4 years, but I think for the next 2 years, you don't really have to worry about a running back or like having a running back one at all. Even if he doesn't spend a 93 on Mixon or 104 on Zeke, he can still build his team around you know around that. But I mean, if you don't have one of those, then you need one of those top running backs, right? It boxes you in, and the price was so high this year that I think this is arguably like the safer move, like to ensure yourself from having to like make an overpay next year. So with that said, like I from speaking to him, I don't think there were a lot of running backs of that potential, like for trade, and it's
Mm,
because everybody doesn't want to be playing that game. Everyone doesn't want to be paying 93 for Mixon. So I think that's why this was like a uniquely um, special type of like in terms of pure value, like it might not be the best, but like in terms of team construction, just having that type of running back that he can be like, okay, he's like a low end running back one, or high end running back two. Like even those aren't like super cheap to get. So
yeah.
yeah, so I think that was like a unique advantage that we had in making this deal happen.
Yeah, it's a brilliant point. I mean, I think for me, coming into the season, my hope was that Josh Jacobs would be the top back for me. But again, it didn't end up working out just because of other things. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Jacobs also isn't, I don't think, a top 5 back or anything like that. But he is good. I think good enough to be on a contending team. But you know, just other things. And so, yeah, I think all of those factors come into play. It's an interesting point too about which running backs were available like that.
Yeah, no, I mean,
It's
I took a look at
fair.
who might be the net like top 20 of running backs next year, and again, 15 to 16 of them are being kept of the top 20. Like
Jeez.
it's too early to say what the top 20 will be next year. I'm
Right.
sure there'll be a rookie or something in there, but I legitimately think 15ish are probably cheap enough on other people's teams where they'll be kept, or they already have contracts. So again, like if you want to deal with the $40 Le'Veons, or going above that, like the $90 Mixins and stuff, that's fine. But CEH for 2 years probably at least he'll return pretty good value, and you won't have to overpay for a different position, and you can still build your team kind of normally. So I think that has some type of value to him that goes beyond like, oh yeah, a wide receiver for 4 years is probably more stable. Yeah, but the running backs are just so scarce right now.
Yeah, and to be fair to your point, Harlem, Diaz, sorry, Diaz, is that I do think he could have maybe potentially added one more piece, potentially. I don't know. I mean, I wasn't in the discussions and the talks, of course, but maybe he could have gotten one more flyer piece. But it's hard to say. Denzel Mims, I don't know, just tossing out as something, but maybe he could have gotten something more. I don't know.
Well,
No,
what I
the
would say
problem.
is
Yep,
Go ahead.
the beauty of the league is that it's set up in a way that there isn't one specific strategy that you need to
absolutely,
have.
absolutely,
For instance,
I love it.
the team that's won more games than any other in our league this year is the team that does not have that alpha running back.
Good point. Good point. Good point. And I think that also is also speaks to how
Wait.
this year is.
Are you insinuating that David Montgomery is not an alpha running back? Excuse me.
What comes after what comes after beta?
You had David Montgomery. You should know how good he is.
Oh man. No, but yeah, I think it also has to do with this year being pretty weird. I think when it comes to playoff time, I do think that having that top running back will matter. I think there's a team that recognized that last week and made a trade to address adding on to that running back room. But yeah, it definitely will matter. I think at the end of the day. I mean, there's also a little bit of luck that might have played into the record as well. Sorry,
No,
Joe.
I do get what Diaz is saying. Like,
Yeah,
yes, the flexibility in our flexes and stuff make it really easy to build a team that has strengths like in any different place.
for
But
sure.
I think going into a season, every team hopes that they have a running back one. I mean, sometimes you don't, and you pivot to a roster that ends up being the strength is in the wide receivers or quarterbacks, whatever. But I mean, I'm sure even Duho thought like Jonathan Taylor could be a low end running back one, or like especially after the injury,
Right.
or Austin Eckler could have been that running back
Eckler,
one.
true.
So I think going into a season at least, you most teams don't go in and be like, oh yeah, I don't want a running back one. They try to get a running back one, and then if that doesn't work out, hopefully you find enough strength in your roster elsewhere to make it an overall strong roster. But I mean, I guarantee you, if John didn't have CEH going into next season, he would have felt that he had to get one of the top, 3 or 4 guys that I mentioned that might not be kept, and those are probably overpays. I mean, just because of scarcity.
Hmm. That's the word, scarcity. I was trying to
Yeah.
look for it earlier. I couldn't find it. um, yeah, so I think that was a pretty good breakdown of the deal. Good for both sides, as usual, for these types of trades. And it's very early to judge on what the outcome is, obviously, for the team. There's a little bit more risk for the team that's going and pushing their chips in here, but that's how it is if you want to win. Let's go to the scoring from last week. Let's just start with the matchup that you had, Dustin. So since we covered your team already, let's just go to the victor of that matchup, which was Flushing. And when I talked about this team last week, I asked Dustin if Flushing could make the playoffs or their chances of even contending. Diaz, I'm going to turn that to you now. Same kind of question. Do you think that this team can make the playoffs and even contend for the title?
I don't think they can contend for the title. I certainly think they can make the playoffs. When I was doing the write up last night, I was looking at this team, staring at it, and just saying, well, yeah, why not? Why not? The problem is that they don't have the depth, and I don't trust the organization to go out there and find those guys in a trade or on waivers to fill out the rest of their roster. And what I mean is, okay, when they have no buys, then they can start Mixon and Carson if they're both healthy at their starting running back slots. But Adrian Peterson he's basically a husk at this point. I don't think that a playoff team wants to rely on Adrian Peterson.
Right.
They can start Keenan Allen and Terry McLaurin, and that's great at wide receiver 1 and 2. But I don't think a playoff team wants to start Brandon Cooks or Sterling Shepard at wide receiver 3. And you go down the list, and if the quarterbacks play great, play up to their potential, then this team can beat any in the league. But I think that those flex spots are a severe weakness for this team, and I don't see them filling them deftly enough to compete for a championship.
Wow, that's pretty definitive. Has your opinion changed, Dustin, since last week?
It has changed because we did, I think maybe last week or 2 weeks ago, we said like, oh, this team has been really unlucky, and
Yeah.
I would say that's flipped. This team has been very lucky now
Okay.
to be 4-4 with the 8th most points, so bottom 3 in total points scored, and they're 4-4. I think they came up against the one team that they could beat last week,
Yep.
and otherwise it would have just been probably curtains for them in terms of even discussing this. But I will say, being 4-4, I mean, the record is the record, right? That's what I always say. So
Yeah.
yeah, you can argue, oh, they didn't deserve to be 4-4, whatever, all you want, but they are 4-4, and they are 3-2 in division. So, and they do have a win against some like a potential team in division that they might be competing for a spot with. So I don't know. I would have said, I said probably not last week. I'm still gonna say probably not a contender, but stranger things have happened, and they are 4-4, and they can't deny they got lucky last week, but
For sure.
arguably their team won't be that weak again, and they
Right.
who's not to say they don't get lucky, 3 or 4 more times, and that's already a playoff spot. So, but I do understand the concern that Diaz has. There are some, at least on paper, some major holes on this team that you don't want on a playoff team. And I don't really know what kind of flexibility they have with their pieces to trade to fix those up, because I'm not seeing a ton of attractive extra depth or extra keepers that they could package to fill those spots. And it doesn't really seem like they're pushing for that kind of trade either. Although I don't really know what they think of their own team, so I don't want to speak on that. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I would be surprised if this ends up being, a contending team. Maybe sneak into the playoffs, but even if they do, it would be extremely fortunate for them to be a real contending team.
Yeah, I mean, I for the most part, I do agree with you guys, but I'll be honest, I do root a lot for Flushing. I think it might be the QBs. It's just so fun and dynamic to have Deshaun Watson and Kyler Murray on the same team. And, yes, you guys are right. The flex positions, it's a little shady, but you got Keenan Allen. He's pretty good, and you got Chris Carson, who's always underrated, and I think he's always very solid. And I could see a world where this team makes the playoffs and even makes it out the first round and makes the finals this year. I mean, it's possible, right? But as you guys are saying, a lot of things need to break right. So it's going to be interesting to see how this team finishes the year, and maybe we're underestimating the GM a little bit here, and his ability. Maybe he can show something more for 2020. But we'll see. My favorite phrase. Let's go to the next matchup, LIC versus Oakland, and this was an interesting matchup in terms of the records. This is the first loss now to Oakland, and then LIC moves up to, I believe, 3-5, right? So they are slowly coming into the picture for the playoffs even. Kind of some interesting starts, but it didn't matter with a lot of really good performances. Let's start with you, Dustin, in terms of your opinion on LIC.
I mean, first of all, I want to say LIC has a ridiculous all-time record against Oakland.
Oh yeah,
against Tuho.
Yeah.
They were 11-2 coming into this matchup, and now they're 12-2. That's a .857 winning percentage.
Yikes.
That's, I think, as high as any team has against another. Barring like the like small sample sizes maybe. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy. 14 times they faced off, and 12 times LIC or Warren has won. So in a way, like, one team was undefeated coming into this game matchup, and one of them was considered a lottery team. But in another way, not unexpected at all to see this kind of win.
Good point.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of LIC, I said that they'll probably scrap to like a much better record than this 2-5 start they started with, and I think we're going to see the same thing. I don't think this is a playoff team still. Probably, you know, not there's just not enough room for error for this team, even if they are like a really good team the rest of the way. But I do think this team is going to scrap it together and get to like 6-7, maybe even 7-6, and we'll look back at it like it wasn't too bad of a year for them.
Diaz.
I would say no matter what record they finish with, we're not going to say it's a bad year for them because they already have under contract three pretty exciting players. Well, two exciting players in Mike Williams for next year, and they found Justin Jefferson in the rough, Tua, who they already love, who they may sign to a contract, and now Antonio Brown, who if he's back in the NFL, I mean, you could if Antonio Brown looks like 70% of what he was before he lost his mind, you could sign him to a 4-year contract. Like,
he's 32. I mean, even if he is looking like he's 100%, 4 years that's a Mars type of deal to give out, I think.
well, it would be impractical for them to do it because they should be giving Justin Jefferson a long contract.
Yeah.
At the price, it was really a very shrewd move by them, and I think a lot of teams are going to be looking and saying, who's the next guy who is suspended for half the season? Because I have to go pick him up after Kareem Hunt and Antonio Brown have come back.
I want to say though, Kareem Hunt and Antonio Brown's their suspensions are quite different. Kareem Hunt was, for all we could tell, a one-off situation, and he did express some remorse right after. Antonio Brown was given every chance to stop his spiral of destruction last year, and it kept getting worse and worse and worse. And like for Hunt and for others, you might say, oh, that was like a big mistake, and like he's stupid and like whatever. But for Antonio Brown, I do wonder if there's like he must have seen like, okay, like this is my chance to like at least like come back a little bit. But even in the off season, he was like F you Goodell, I retire, like 2 or 3 different times. I still think he's a loose cannon that cannot be trusted. I'd be fine giving him a 1-year deal just because the risk is just like a wasted keeper spot and whatever. But I don't understand. I don't think there's anything he can do this year to make me want to give him a multi-year contract, just because the issues that popped up that made him crazy last year, have they gone away? Did he get like some magic therapy that makes him a good person now and like not prone to like falling into the same troubles that he did before? Like, I don't think that's true. But it was a savvy move, and we'll see very shortly how much skill and talent he still has, and I imagine it'll be still pretty high. But like that was never the concern for me. That I was never worried that Antonio Brown was washed up or feeling age or whatever. It was always just how crazy is he? And last year, just there was too much evidence that he's legitimately crazy and not just like, oh, made a bad decision once, or oh, like made a big mistake that he's going to try to correct. Like I think like we might see it again even this year.
Yeah, I mean, my only thing about the situation is that Antonio Brown was on Mars's roster for one. I mean, I just feel so bad for John. Like, he shouldn't have listened to some of the chatter. He should have just held on. I think I mentioned this before too. If only he held on, because he was right at the end of the day. And so, I mean, again, we haven't seen Brown, but still, like, he did come back. He's on a team which should be productive, and so with the quarterback he's already played with as well. So, just unfortunate for Mars. That's the only thing I keep thinking of in terms of how it relates to our league. Let's go to Oakland, where they just received their first loss. But it's not the end of the world, obviously. I
cracked open a White Claw. Official. The undefeated season it'll be my legacy, not Oakland's.
Oh yeah, uh, I mean, we talked about it a lot about how this team had a little bit of the shades of the last undefeated team of last year. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, I guess my question, I don't really know what the question is. I mean, Diaz, I guess what are your thoughts on in terms of their team and despite their record, I think I have some growing concerns about the roster at the moment.
Yeah, well, I think that everybody shares those concerns. I think the biggest challenge is that their roster, they don't really look like they have the pieces to make a change to this roster. Unlike a lot of, when you have a team that has had this much success, you would expect that a lot of it would be attributed to finding, good cheap players who might be attracted to other teams.
Right.
As it happens for Oakland, so much of their success has been attributed to defenses and kickers, which don't really return much value in the trade market. And so, there's concern to be had all over the roster. But I certainly think that they'll be able to continue to compete, and they do have that upside. I know that Kenyon Drake is persona non grata on this show, but he was a contributor at the second half of last season,
That's
and
true.
um, there's some reason to believe that he can't do it again because he's looked so bad this year. But
Hmm.
having Kenyon Drake be an effective contributor definitely changed the complexion of this team if he can make that happen.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's true. Dustin?
Yeah, I mean, I think Diaz's point is really insightful because, like, yeah, like you would expect a team like this to have some pieces they can move around to improve their team, but it is hard to see where or what kind of player they could move to make that happen. I think Kenyon Drake, they did see this coming where they were probably not going to have those like pieces that are movable and not contributing too much to their team. So they I think they tried to pick up a guy that could be a chip at the trade deadline in Kenyon Drake, but unfortunately he did get
Mm.
hurt and so that probably makes it harder than ever to make that kind of trade. But he I think he did recognize, oh, like I might not have that kind of piece, so like let's take a risk on Kenyon Drake, and we see how coveted running back keepers are. So I'm sure they were hoping that Kenyon Drake has a few good games, and then it won't be like the super attractive keeper piece because he did have a bad start, but you know some team probably would be willing to bet on Kenyon Drake maybe continuing his upward trend, and then maybe next year he'd be a starting running back, and a starting running back at that price is I think for a lot of teams probably still attractive. um, so that went wrong, and then Jonathan Taylor, that could have been. I mean, he was taking one pick behind CEH, and then the Marlon Mack injury made him look like he could be even more valuable. But really, he hasn't done much with the opportunity. And then, whether it was ankle injury or not, he had probably his worst week last week. So, you know, it's looking like he doesn't have the flexibility to improve their team as much as they probably do want. I just have a question for you guys. Like, what would you do if you were this team? Because you're already definitely making playoffs. Like, you're 7-1. I don't see it falling apart enough to miss that. Do you just stand pat and like just hope that things start breaking better for you again, or is there a piece that you would try to move to make an upgrade from this roster? Is probably the better question.
I'll let you tackle it first, Diaz, because I think I kind of answered
Yeah,
a little
if you
bit.
put yourself in the shoes of Oakland, a 7-1 means you're probably almost definitely making playoffs. So is there one guy that you'd be like, okay, like I, I'm willing to trade this guy to make some improvements?
It's a tough question. Tough question. I remember thinking about this last week.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you explore it because you never know who
That's
out
true. Yeah.
there happens to like a player more than average.
Mm-hmm.
I think that a lot of people have the feeling that Jonathan Taylor maybe, he hasn't looked good in the NFL. It's not that he's lacking opportunity or that he's in a bad situation. He hasn't played well, but
Right.
you may have someone out there who says, "Well, I love that opportunity," and I think that that's a player that I'd want to pay enough for
Mm-hmm.
to give you an upgrade. But for me, I think that I would do what what Duho has been doing, I think that his strategy is correct in the sense of if you don't have those pieces or the owners aren't out there to value those players, you look for players who you think could have opportunity to make an impact in the playoffs. I think that Duho has been looking at schedules in weeks 14, 15, and 16,
Hmm.
seeing which players could be acquired that will give him an advantage. That's something that he revealed to me after the Allen Robinson trade. Um,
Interesting.
and so, I think that that's certainly, I think that that's the move to make because the player may not look ideal in a vacuum, but if he's facing Atlanta or whoever else, then, sounds great.
Yeah.
That's so true. Allen Robinson faces the Texans, Vikings, Jaguars. Oh my God, yeah, that's hilarious. I mean, that's all that matters to him, right? Because he doesn't need to
That's
focus.
what a 7-0 team can type of trade they can make. Like honestly,
That's
they just
hilarious.
need to probably win, one or two more games to lock in a playoff spot. So, yeah, that is probably their best strategy instead of like trying to commit keepers to something that isn't really there. Maybe just moving around some pieces and getting guys that do have good records late.
I will say though that it is a dangerous strategy. I've done it once before as well. It doesn't always work out. I really love that one year where Jameis had a beautiful matchup. I forgot who it was, but it was a great
Yeah,
matchup.
yeah,
He sucked, and then I
yeah,
was
yeah.
it was.
Yeah.
But anyways, I mean, it can work. It also may not work, but that is something that you want to think about, of course. And I was also just gonna add on and say I might even think about those players that have the increased opportunities in the second half, even making something like a trade that I did with Zach Moss, like where I thought that the opportunity might lean one way, and I'm gonna do it a little bit early before it happens. It's something like that where you think some player might get more opportunity later in the season and make a difference for you in the stretch, down the stretch. Um, okay, yeah, let's go to Virginia Yonkers now. Both teams are 4-4, and it's kind of two differing stories. One on an upward trend, one on a downward trend at the moment. It was a very close loss. I think was probably kicking himself about the Dalvin Cook trade, but it's
They would have
okay.
won if they didn't make the trade
Exactly. We
this
yeah.
week.
I mean, I don't have to mention. I think we all know because Dalvin Cook went crazy. But at the end of the day, what happened was Yonkers came out victorious, with with the home field advantage is about a 10 point victory. But Yonkers is now really in the picture, and I think I've been really loving the team on this show, and there's reasons for that because I have a lot of the same players in a different league. But at the same time, I really do think this team could be a main challenger for the undisputed number one, which we'll get to later. But I think this could be the number two team. What do you guys think about that take? Let's start with you, Dustin.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot to like on the roster. I think they're pretty much solid at every position. QB2 is probably the shakiest because Wentz has looked pretty on and off bad. But I mean, defense, kicker, obviously, and then like pretty much all their starting roster spots are guys that I would like to have on a really good roster. So yeah, I think the fact that they're 4-4, I think they have to be considered a threat. And yeah, I honestly do see this team making playoffs, which is why I personally think for my team, this is one of the contenders that I was thinking of that could
Sure.
usurp that playoff spot.
Catch up, right? Diaz.
I'm looking at the running backs for this team, and I think that there's definitely a question mark there. I think that they have a good amount of depth, but they don't have. I wouldn't be confident having any of these players as my running back one if I wanted to compete in the playoffs. And I think that most of the playoff teams might have players who are better than these guys as their RB2s as well. So I agree that I think this team has the inside path to the postseason. I think that they have a big advantage over my team this week, and I think that they should be favored to win and go to 5-4 in a big divisional win. But I don't. Of course, your take is very hot. So
Yeah, it's
I
pretty
don't think
pretty out there.
I can't handle it. I don't think this team quite measures up to the top two.
Sure. I think there's just a lot of players that I like. Obviously, Michael Thomas getting healthy would be huge for them. if he is a player that he's been in the past couple of years, and then you pair that with Tyreek Hill, the wide receiver room, there's no question. But as you mentioned, yeah, the running backs, it is a little bit shaky. I do believe in Lindsey a lot, so if he's healthy, but he doesn't seem like he can stay on the field that much. But if he is healthy, then I think he could be very good as well. Let's move on quickly to Virginia now. I guess Diaz, you can take it in any direction you want. I know I've set it up quite a bit, but there's just been a couple of injuries that I think have been very disappointing for them this past week, and it's not looking too good, I would say.
Yeah, the injuries are brutal, and this is part of the game.
Yeah.
But you really hate to see it, especially right after a team makes a big trade. They're trying to evaluate where they are and where they're going to be, and these injuries really change the complexion of that. Um, and so that's frustrating. I think what's more frustrating what's very frustrating to me to watch is the Tampa Bay backfield situation.
Right.
At various points in the season, you look at Ronald Jones and you say, boy, $10, what a great value. You look at Leonard Fournette and you say, wow, $6, what a great value. Because whenever they look like they have control of the backfield, it's a treasure trove of fantasy points. But we see now why the owners were correct in valuing these players at those prices, because Bruce Arians is unwilling to commit to Ronald Jones. It's like an OJ Howard situation. I don't know how many times we need to hear it before we can acknowledge it, but
it's so true.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that Leonard Fournette will have up and down moments himself. It's really a shame that this team that has such a great offense can't contribute at the running back position.
Yeah, it is really unfortunate. Dustin.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, obviously the injuries are probably the biggest reason that this team is trending down.
Yeah.
Kittle left in the middle of the game, I think, and Galladay left pretty early and gave him a 0. And this matchup was close enough where either one of those injuries probably could have been the difference maker.
For sure.
I did also wonder though, like I thought Marvin Jones should be started over Jonnu going into this week, and I remember thinking like, oh, like why is he not starting Marvin Jones over him? And then I was also kind of low on Ronald Jones because I do think Arians is going to go back and forth a lot, and like I thought that Jackson with Eckler out is still like a better play there. So those are, I did wonder like, oh, like I'm surprised that he's actually starting Rojo and Jonnu over what I thought were better matchups, and it did turn out to be a pretty big difference, because I think those guys did a lot better. But I mean, that's not just hindsight. Like that was something I actively saw like during the week, and I was like, oh, like he's probably gonna switch them, but he ended up not switching them. So everyone makes bad start sits. Like me, of course, I've had some pretty bad ones too. But I do wonder if if Kwai is 5-3 right now, and the honky tonkers are what 3-5, right?
Yeah,
then we're not having this conversation about, oh yeah, like do you think Yonkers can it's a very different conversation, because you'd be up 2 games, and the head-to-head is there, and I honestly think Yonkers might have thought about selling some of their pieces if they had lost. So it's obviously more the injuries. I want to make that clear. Like the injuries are really what cost them here, but it was such a big matchup either way, and it must hurt them so bad to lose this one head-to-head right after making the trade they did.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even describe. This has to be a painful loss, because of how close it was, because of the injuries and who those injuries happen to. They're just key players that you're banking on, and it's got to be unfortunate for them. Let's move on to another unfortunate team, the New England Kingfishers, and their loss to Harlem. Diaz, man, your team with Devontae Adams, it feels like it's cheating sometimes. I mean, how's it feel for you when you see that? When they get close to the goal line and they don't run, they just, see an open Devontae Adams and get. I mean, I'm sure you're going to love it too, Dustin, with Aaron Rodgers, but my goodness, it's just insane how they do that.
Yeah, it feels like it's cheating. It's just unfortunate that Devonte Adams is about 75% as good as Tyler Lockett, who's
Oh,
clearly the best receiver in the NFL.
That one was rough.
I'm sorry.
We talked
I'm
about it on the show,
sorry.
but that had to be such a rough way to lose that because going into Sunday night projections,
Mm-hmm.
it did look like you had a, pretty firm lead, and as long as that didn't happen, like you'd be sitting pretty nicely. But that had to be just, such a gut punch.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but it's past, and Devonte is great. I remember the year. I guess it was probably the year after I won. When everything went wrong, as wonky as you know that it does.
Oh.
Devonte was like the only player who showed up, like every week,
Oh wow.
and so of course, they're professionals on the field. It has nothing to do with you, but it just felt so personal that every player was like terrible except for him every week. I think I traded for Odell Beckham, and like he stunk, and
Oof.
yeah, so yeah, he's one of the all-time greats, and he's definitely it is. It's seeing all those short passes to him was very vindicating. Yeah.
Um, you're 4-4 now, so I guess I'm curious to what you think your own playoff chances are for your team, and I'll ask the same question to you too, Dustin.
Yeah, there's a path to the playoffs, and I'm definitely a believer in quarterback is a weak position at my team. I can't say it's the weakest anymore because I've been starting Mike Gesicki, who gets 2 targets a game.
You've been very steadfast in starting him, though. I
Yeah, I admire it. I really admire. I saw it. I was like, oh my god. Okay, all right. Well, but
But
anyways.
I'm a believer that in a good matchup, a quarterback can drop 30. Much like a mediocre or bad quarterback can drop 30 much easier than you can see something like that with
Yep.
a receiver or a running back. So, I believe that because my running backs and receivers are the strength of my team, that I give myself a chance, or I give us a chance every week.
Hmm.
But this team isn't of the caliber of I think a few of the other teams competing for the playoffs, and so I think that it would be great. It would be great to compete for consolation as well, and we're just going to give it our best effort every week, and make sure to uphold the integrity of the league, and compete hard.
Love that. Love that. Dustin, your thoughts on their playoff chances?
I think the winner of this week's upcoming matchup will decide who gets a playoff spot because you guys are playing Yonkers, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you know, obviously you're not out of it at 4-5 for either one of you, but I do think this team, both of your teams are very, very good on paper. I would say pretty close in terms of strength on paper, and winning this head to head will give one of you a huge leg up on who ends up making playoffs. And I'm looking a little bit ahead at Harlem's schedule, and I honestly think they can win a lot of these matchups. So you know, it, I think their chances are a little bit higher than maybe what DS's tone indicates, or maybe even like what I was thinking coming into the show. I actually
Interesting.
think, for me, I think Yonkers and Harlem are pretty equal on paper for me. I know Wonku likes Yonkers a whole lot more. You know, considering calling them like second best team, whatever. But I actually think they're both around like the third or fourth best teams on paper. So I actually think if I were giving odds for Yonkers and Harlem to make playoffs, it'd
Yep.
be pretty much a coin flip for me.
Interesting. I will say, so in terms of the schedules, Harlem will face Yonkers, and then it faces Mars, followed by Oakland, and then LIC. And then the other thing that I forgot to mention was that Christian McCaffrey's coming back for you.
Yeah.
So this is that's a big thing. That's a big thing for your team. Michael Thomas potentially coming back for Yonkers. I could see the similarities there, and these are great players that I'm all too familiar with. I think they can make a difference down the stretch. So good luck to you both. You're still starting Gasecki? But
Well,
anyways,
our other options are Austin Hooper, who's on a bye and hurt, and
just a
Jordan
question.
Reed.
Just a question. It's up to you for to decide. So on the flip side here is New England, and it's been a rough season, but the the stars for my team have been Travis Fulgham and Corey Davis. That's the type of year that it's been. Lamar Jackson has been awful, but
Solved.
solved off just straight awful. And I think I'm not too concerned in terms of if someone is like gonna come to me and be like, oh man, your contract was a mistake. I don't think it's a mistake. I think it will be okay for next year. But then I remember that I had those things with Mariota, and I'm not comparing Mariota to Lamar. They're very very different. Lamar MVP. I mean he's very very good, but I think he will be hopefully back to his normal self after he gets rid of this bad and curse. And you know it's been a rough year, but I'm trying to put up a competitive roster still, to do my part. But it is rough to be the bottom, the cellar of the league right now. Diaz, your thoughts?
I think it's interesting to examine a player like Lamar Jackson and question what kind of impact this year's performance will have on the league itself. When a player succeeds to that level, it's every other owner in the league says, okay, how do I find that guy? How do I find the next Lamar Jackson?
Yep.
And there's some question now to me of what kind of contracts will people want to give to quarterbacks? How will people view the value of quarterbacks in the draft? You look at it's been so long since really the quarterbacks that everyone wants have been available in the draft. Maybe more than one or two of them, and those players' values have been declining steadily. And I'll be curious to see if I agree that Lamar Jackson feels like a value at 63 or at one point did. I'll be curious to see if people continue to feel that way, and how this affects the market in general.
Yep. It's definitely a question in my mind as well. Dustin, your thoughts, opinions?
I mean, yeah, officially your season, regarding playoffs is, I think, probably over.
Yeah. It's over.
So yeah, I mean, now you're really just performing the autopsy and seeing what went wrong and like what can you fix and stuff. But honestly, a lot of the stuff was out of your control, like injuries and Lamar Jackson regressing to the point that he has this year, like whether it's solved or he's just chilling or whatever the reason is, like it doesn't really matter for fantasy purposes. Like he's just been a disappointment.
Yep.
So I don't think that was anything you could have really predicted. I guess the only thing you could do is like consider like, okay, would other teams have given Lamar? You gave him 2 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think the question is like, would other teams have given him 1 year, or like maybe you made a mistake by giving him 2 when the value on that second year was, I mean, it was still going to be good, but maybe not like super, super good.
Right.
And then, it looks like you took on all the risk for maybe not a ton of benefit, but, a lot of that is just hindsight, right? If Lamar Jackson looked exactly like he did last year, we probably wouldn't even be having that discussion. But yeah, I do think maybe there are some things that you could have done differently, but mostly it's just injuries and stuff that you can't predict. Like, with Zeke like sucking, like I can't predict that Dak's gonna go down and that offensive line is all gonna get hurt. So that's not really a learnable lesson, and I don't think there are really that many learnable lessons for you either.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just love Lamar, and everyone knows this, and so I don't even care too much, even if it is an overpay for next year. I just have a ton of fun watching this guy, rooting for the guy, and having him on my team. And it's going to be hard, even still, to try and trade him away from my team. I just really really love the player, and I think he's special.
In the end, fantasy football, I mean, we do it for fun. There's
true.
a little bit of money involved, but like honestly, like I could not get any of that money back, and I don't consider it a loss or something that's integral to my enjoyment of the HFFL. So like in the end, we do this all for fun. We do this show for fun. We pour hours into managing our team for fun. And if Lamar Jackson is the guy that, brings you fun, brings you joy, then no regrets. I don't think, and I wasn't trying to say you should regret
Oh
it,
yeah, yeah,
but,
yeah, yeah.
I think that's very important to keep in mind as well. And, for anyone that, is finding fantasy football like not fun, like just find the fun by, picking guys you like. If you win while having fun, that's great. If not, then, it's still got to be fun in its own way.
Exactly, exactly. And I will say, even with my 1-7 record, I still look forward to the Sundays. I still look forward to see what kind of plays my players will make.
Or what kind of plays they won't make.
Exactly. There's more of that this season, but it's still exciting. So, yeah. I mean, it's easy for me to say though, with coming off of last season. But anyways, let's go to the last team here. I think we covered Mars, and Mars really did a great job this week. I will say I do want to give him credit for their performance. They really gave it to Capital Region. I know you can't control it sometimes, but they put up a good number for the players that they have sometimes. But Capital Region, they got the Hamilton with 197. Their team looks unstoppable, and maybe Delvin Cook found out that he was traded for Herbert and Galladay, and he was like, "Screw this! I'm going to show you that I'm the best running back."
I'm gonna outscore both of them by myself.
Yeah, I'm going to show everyone that I'm the best running back. Everyone talking about how WAD did a masterpiece job. What about Ken? What about my new team? And he went out there and put on a show for real life, for fantasy. It was insane. And then of course Mahomes is doing Mahomes things. This team is really, really good, and I think it's going to be the undisputed number one team in the league. Dustin, you can have the floor first on Capital Region.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone is in agreement by now that this is, the number one team on paper, and they've been living up to it. Honestly, their biggest missteps have been defense, and hopefully they do fix that by the playoffs. But even if they don't, they're still putting up 197 points. So, maybe they, for competitive purposes, it's good that they are bad at picking defenses. But yeah, I mean, I don't see how this team can really fall apart at this point. They're just so good at every position. They have guys like Miles Sanders and Alan Lazard that are not even contributing right now because they're hurt. And once they come back, they'll have depth to rival any other team. And Cook and Kamara at the top, Patrick Mahomes at the top, Tyler Lockett, Travis. I mean, there's just too many guys that I think are studs and stars that it's really hard to catch a bad week from this team. So, yeah, I mean, I think they're heavy favorites at this point, even with, a 7-1 team ahead of them. And, my team just made a trade and, some of the other teams look pretty dangerous, but I think all of those other teams are in a different tier than this team. So I would be pretty surprised if they don't win the championship this year. It would take some, I think it would legitimately take some injuries or some crazy underperformances in the playoffs for them not to win it all this year.
Diaz, you're getting the same kind of vibes?
Yeah, it looks like a great team. It really does. Can't argue with anything. Looking at Dalvin Cook and Alvin Kamara, it's funny because I guess they were probably drafted in the same year because their contracts are about to end.
I think so.
And we're talking about running backs and how valuable they are and how they don't move around. And Alvin Kamara, true to form, has stayed on this team forever.
Yeah.
Because who would ever trade a piece that valuable?
Yep.
I think Dalvin Cook has been traded to. This is now his fourth HFFL franchise.
Oof.
Despite being a great player, he had injury issues, which is probably why. But it's funny to look at those two guys on the same team.
Right, and they're coming together at the right time. They're going to be enjoying each other's company on Capital Region as and
I do want I told you so on WonQ.
What is that?
You were assuming that DeAndre Swift was going to be like a huge thing going forward, and I said he's great talent, but I don't trust the Lions. I don't trust the Lions to fucking not fuck that shit up, and they're fucking that shit up so bad because he had 3.3 last week. So you were saying, oh, maybe this is a guy that they could rely on every week going forward, and I think he'll have his good weeks, and I still think he's a good talent, but I think you don't know the Lions well enough if you thought that was gonna be so certain.
Hey, man, it's not the end of the season yet, and I think it could be still a blip. I'm still gonna stick with my take. It's not over yet, right? So there's still a couple of weeks.
No,
We'll
it's
see what
over because
Swift's.
I said it. He's gonna be inconsistent. I didn't say he was gonna be useless. I just said
Oh,
like, oh, he's gonna be inconsistent because not because he's bad, but because the Lions are gonna do weird stuff with like committees and stuff. And
sure.
he is gonna be inconsistent. I think, and he already has been. So that I'm already taking a victory lap on. But I mean, he doesn't really need it. He really doesn't need it. So as getting Dalvin Cook really kind of makes that just like icing on the cake. So
Right, and
it's not really relevant.
yeah, sure, and again, there's still a couple of weeks. I mean, it could be possible. I mean, it's not impossible, right? That he shows up and becomes a key factor. We don't know, and he does have a slot, right? He's got the Hasty slot here. We don't know how long Hasty will be. He could be very valuable as well, but we don't know how much he could be valuable or how long he has that kind of value for. So, um, as always, we will see. I think my personal belief is that Swift will play a factor, and maybe you're right. Maybe it is going to be inconsistent, and he might not show up every week, but
It's not him. It's the Lions.
we'll see.
I just want to make it clear. It's the Lions.
It takes one injury. Look at Miles Sanders last year.
Oh, true. And he is Miles Sanders. I mean, he probably won't even be starting Swift with Miles Sanders.
Yeah.
Sanders was being held back by a husk of a running back who got hurt, and then
True.
he became a fantasy superstar.
True.
But the Lions are even stupider than the Eagles are. So
The Lions are pretty stupid. Patricia is really, really dumb. So, so I don't doubt you on that for sure.
yes, what do you think of Jermichael, Marshawn Lynch, Hasty? Do you see the comparison?
You know what? I have not watched the 49ers game. Maybe I'll see him tonight.
We'll see it tonight.
Will, yeah.
They run the ball. They know how to run the ball.
Yeah, they can't stop the run, so I'm sure I'll have a great game tonight.
Exactly. Man, I was gonna ask something about Capital Region, but I think oh yeah. So one thing about Capital Region, although they do have a roster that looks like it's going to be unstoppable, right? But today, the GM made a mistake. He went over the salary cap. So, is there room even still for the GM to make mistakes and for other teams to still compete just because of the fact that sometimes he hasn't shown the full, what's the right word here? Like attention to detail, I guess, to putting out something that will be perfect. Right, there are still these little mistakes that happen here and there, and you do see that in terms of the defenses that they sometimes choose as well.
Yeah, I mean, the Mars owner would probably agree with you, and the sloppiness is a little bit, it probably is, something that does hold them back a little. I think they've had, this great set of keepers for 2 or 3 years now, and until this year they haven't really put it all together. Some of it was injury, and some of it I think was maybe not maximizing what they could get out of the pieces they had. But that is a sign of kind of their lack of attention to detail. But at the same time, I don't think it's going to really hurt them that much this year, just because I think to this point they've played it well enough where it's set up really well for them to it could probably just autopilot all the way to the championship, honestly.
Okay. Diaz, what do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. They're so close to the salary cap that there's really no flexibility for them to like do something stupid like claim someone off someone's practice squad or make a trade.
I don't know.
Doesn't make sense. Like
yeah, it's true. Yeah. I mean, we have been critical of some of the moves that they've made in the past, right? Some of the practice squad activations, some of things here and there, and also even the Justin Herbert. They didn't draft; it was auto draft selection. So, I don't know.
Herbert's dead cap hit next year, right?
Yeah.
Like there are definitely some moves around the edges that I definitely don't like from this team week in and week out, but. It's hard to criticize a team that put together, a Kamara, Cook, Patrick Mahomes, like Kelsey, like that core. It is probably like, I don't want to say idiot proof, but like it is probably idiot proof. Any owner could probably at this point, it's just set up so well, and I will credit him for setting it up this well because Patrick Mahomes
for sure.
Alvin Kamara, like those are guys that he went out and got. So, I think like for all the, small bad moves that we criticize, like he's made the big ones that matter to get his team in this position. And I really don't see him, fumbling this down the stretch.
Okay, just was curious. I mean, that is the thought that I have as a 1-7 team. So I'm sure if I was a 4-4 or 5-3 team, I'd be just like you guys and being like, "This is over, this is over." But I do wonder how much of a gap this team has versus the other teams that we went through, right? Like the Yonkers, the Harlem, the Great Kills, the Virginias, and the Flushings. So
They have the best parts of pretty much every team. Like, their QBs are as good as like, Great Kills QBs. Their running backs are as good as, whoever has the best running backs. Their wide receivers are pretty much as good as, like it's really a Frankenstein team where he does have like pretty much every position group is equal or, tops by themselves. So the only issue is really defense. Like if they had Oakland's defenses, it'd be a complete wrap. But the only hope for everyone else is that they continue to be bad at picking the right defense each week, and they took a -9 last week, but I mean they still put up 197. So, how do you stop a team like that? It's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough. I mean, obviously anything can happen, and maybe we're being a little bit too dismissive of everyone else's chances, but I would be legitimately surprised if anyone else ends up winning the championship this year.
interesting. Um, I will say that there was a trade that happened while we were on air,
Yeah,
so we'll just
live.
quickly go through that. Where is it? It's not showing up in the history. I think it was
It's Andy Dalton
Andy
for
Dalton.
Seattle defense and a 2021 third round pick from Mars.
Yep. Uh,
Thoughts, Diaz?
Is this the first time a third round pick has ever been traded?
in season, I think so.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I-
if a third round pick has value, it's probably Mars or New England's, because at least those high third round picks are a little bit closer to
Good
returning.
point. Good
Yeah,
point.
some kind of value. Whereas, if it was, Oakland's third round pick, I would just throw it back right in the trash. That's literally no trade value to most teams. But yeah, I mean, what do you think?
Diaz, you have thoughts, or is that it? Oh,
Okay, so Virginia sent Andy Dalton to Mars. Why does John want Andy Dalton? I don't
so
understand.
here's my take. Mars is 2 deals away from making the
Yeah,
record.
that's my take.
He's now 1 away. He's now 1 away.
So this is my question. Andy Dalton at 21 salary, that's what he's at, right? Isn't it, that's a contract, that's a bad deal, right? That's like a guy that's
Yeah.
making more than he's probably worth,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And to move that, Virginia ends up picking up a third round pick, as dubious as the value of third round picks are, right? Like they're still picking up a little bit of future value. I mean, this is pretty much an easy win, I think, for Virginia. And I think this, continues their, I mean, it's a small win, but it continues their streak of, winning through trades. Because I think moving a $21, cap hit Andy Dalton, who is completely not useful to this team, might open up a little bit of cap space to get, something else, So I think it could be really, really valuable for Virginia in the long run. And then to pick up a third round pick, and, I don't really think Seattle defense is worth all too much, but, I just to drop Andy Dalton's contract for nothing would have been a pretty big win in my view.
Yeah, I mean, I think Diaz, you nailed it too. Like, why would anyone want Andy Dalton?
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know. That's a great question.
I think Wonku is right though. That's the motivation from our side. I think
Yeah.
they're pretty checked out on like what happens this year. They just want to hit the trade record, and I guess this one was easy and accessible to them. Something that they could get without negotiating too much. So I get it from their point of view. I think this could be huge. Looking back on it later, if Virginia has the space to fit in some, I don't think a huge piece, but like a pretty decently big piece around them. I think it could be something that is hugely impactful later.
I remember John was saying that Seattle has a good schedule, so that's why I was looking at it.
Yeah.
They do face the Jets week 14, so that
Mhm.
is very valuable, as I think many people have realized so far. So um, could be useful if Virginia makes the playoffs and needs that one round to get into the finals. So we'll
Yeah.
see if it has implications. I think there weren't that many pickups that are exciting, but if you guys want to go over it,
Jordan Wilkins for 14.
let's take a
I thought that
look.
was pretty exciting.
Sorry. I'm sorry. Jordan Wilkins for 14 is pretty exciting. That's
It
a
is
good
pretty
point. Yeah,
exciting.
that is pretty good.
I want to say that he probably overshot the bid on that. I don't know if anyone else believes in Jordan Wilkins that much.
I don't
Did
even
you? Did you
know.
bid on Jordan Wilkins?
I did not, but I don't know if people have Fab. I don't.
Yeah. That's the bigger thing. I don't think people have enough to spend like 14. Like in a huge chunk like that.
Yeah, I think 9 would have been sufficient. But then
Yeah.
again, he's the guy with the big stack and
He gets his guys. He has
right.
more fab than a lot of teams. So,
And he's got a 7-1 record. So
yeah, and it is more relevant to him than anyone else. Like if someone else gets Jordan Wilkins and he sucks, that's just all suckage. But if he gets Jordan Wilkins and Jordan Wilkins turns out to be nothing, that's overall probably good for him, just because that probably means Jonathan Taylor is doing well.
Yep.
So for him, it's a way of hedging, I guess. Like there's not a lot to lose there.
Diaz, you have thoughts on the waiver wire?
Not really, no. Yeah, like you said, it was a quiet week. I like the stashes: Rashad Penny, Paris Campbell. I've always been a fan of those guys.
Yeah.
I don't know. I also
Gallup too.
Nick Foles went for 5 fab. I don't really know why that was necessary either.
Plus, as we
That
covered,
caused it
yeah,
to go over the cap. Right?
exactly, yeah, exactly.
That on top of like everything, but like even without the cap implications of going 2 over, like did Nick Foles really require 5 fab? I don't know.
Well, Nick Foles has that sweet playoff schedule, so maybe he's stashing. He's gonna
Oh, the Allen Robinson schedule, the same thing. That same thing.
Yeah, so I didn't really like that. And then I hate it because it cost them $2 auction in the future. Like, go ahead, Doug.
I even if he has a good schedule though, would you ever start him above Brady and Mahomes?
No, that's why I don't like the move at all.
It's just a strange thing, and if he really wanted Nick Foles, he could have just came to me when I had him, and I could have just given it to him for less than 5. But anyways,
but the sign that like he got dropped, and isn't that a sign that you could just probably pick him up for like 2 or 3?
Yes, for probably 1, but yeah, 2 or 3.
But like two beats out anyone else that is putting out random bids on like Foles, and then 3 beats out anyone that's thinking that. But like anything beyond that, I'm like, all right, fuck it, you could have Nick Foles.
No, it has not been inspiring, no matter what defense he faces. But again, it's this is what I'm talking about. I feel like there is still room, even with these small moves. They might not seem like they matter, but they always do. And I think maybe there will be some fantasy karma, but then again, I always say this: I'm the 1-7 team, so I don't have as much to complain about as you guys.
Yeah. Real quick, I like Jordan Reed pickup.
Who did that? Was that Harlem?
Harlem, yeah. No one ever knows how long Jordan Reed will stay healthy, but when he is, I think he'll replace a lot of George Kittle's production. And when he has been on the field, he has shown flashes of still being a pretty good talent at tight end. Obviously, health is the issue, but then it's just back to your IR or back to the waivers. It's very low risk and just $1. So
there were a lot of defensive moves, and I think this is about the time of the year where there's going to be a lot of jockeying for those positions in terms of what matchups are left for the remaining weeks. Jalen Hurts now available.
I kind of like the Rashad Penny pickup too.
Yeah. That was the move that Mars made.
I don't think we'll see enough from Hurts this year. Although Wentz could get hurt, or maybe could even get benched at this point. So I don't know. Maybe Mars was like a week early with the Jalen Hurts drop, and then Wentz gets hurt or gets replaced, and then all of a sudden Hurts is the big pickup next week.
Oh
It kind of
my
it kind of
God.
seems like that's the type of season that's been happening for Mars, and it's kind of just bad luck, but that's just the flow of karma right now. So yeah, I do say I like the penny pickup, but it would be kind of funny if Hurts ends up being a bigger factor.
Let's clip it if it happens. But let's. I guess we're closing up on time.
Yep.
The last question I have for you guys: the trade deadline is about a week away. Do you guys foresee some more major deals happening close to that deadline? I'll start with you, DS.
Yeah, I'll say yes. I'm curious because it does seem like there's two teams and then everybody else. So I don't know who really wants to buy right now, but I'm definitely in talks and I'm open to any kind of moves. So it seems like people are interested in making them. So I'll say yeah, maybe one or two more.
Dustin?
So I do think the two biggest trades have probably already happened. But I do foresee another, 1 to 3 like pretty sizable trades where it does shift power a little bit, but probably the Russell Wilson Rodgers trade is one of the big ones, and obviously the Dalvin Cook one is I think the biggest one. I don't think any trades will be bigger than that or bigger than either of those in terms of like you know big pieces moving. But I do see like depending on how this week goes, especially for some of the teams that are 4-4, like I do think some of them will maybe think about not a full sell, but like kind of half sell or partial moves back. So I do think we'll see a couple more moves that do impact how playoffs will look later on.
Yeah, I guess for me, I'm just gonna say I think there will be maybe one or two probably. Maybe not major ones, but I think there will be some moves that will rearrange a couple of players here and
Yeah.
there.
I mean, do either of you guys see a bigger trade than either the Russell Wilson Rodgers trade or the Dalvin Cook Herbert Galladay trade? Like, do you see any trades that you would consider bigger than that happening, or do you think the big two trades might have happened already?
I think those are probably the biggest, but
Okay, I mean, it's
you
possible that
never
they'll be
know.
bigger
Yeah,
than yeah.
in
It's
the
definitely
HFFL,
possible. Mm-hmm.
you never know.
Yeah.
All right, so if you guys don't have anything else, I think that's it for the week 9 show, and we'll be back next week. Hopefully, I think we booked Matt for next week, but
Okay.
it's so I don't want to like commit 100%. I'll give it like a 75%, and should be fun. So thanks again, Diaz. As always, thanks Dustin, and we'll see you guys next week.